Hello, everyone. This is Matt, and this is Cut and Splice. As usual, I am joined by Gil and Jason, and this time around, we are talking about the 2005 film Thank You for Smoking, directed by Jason Reitman and starring Aaron Eckhart, Maria Bello, J.K. Simmons, and several other people. I thought that this would be a nice break from some of our previous episodes in that we're going to delve into what I regard as one of the best political satires of the 21st century so far. I know that that's a bold statement, and Gil and Jason may disagree, but maybe we'll hash it out. Gil, Jason, any initial thoughts?
It's a good movie.
Yeah, no, it is a good movie, and it was his first movie, right? Jason Reitman, first feature.
I didn't know it was his first movie until today when I was looking up his movies, and I was surprised by that. It's definitely a very good movie to be your first film.
Yeah, no, it's a great cast too and stuff. And no, I mean he aside from having, I'm sure, some connection with his dad and stuff, he was
But
just
just a little
also
connection, right?
a little connection, but also he's just extremely talented, and he proved it with this movie and then a few other ones that followed for sure. I know in our comedy episode, which I'm not sure would air before or after this, depending. We discussed how Jason Reitman. What did I say? That he was the M Night Shyamalan of comedies, or something.
Yeah.
That like he slowly started like he burned too hot with his first few movies that I feel it was tough for him to keep that going. But still, he made some really good movies, and I'm glad we have them. I was going to ask you about the political satire thing, or at least this is more just satire, because I do feel like there's a lot of discussion about, where satire is, and so yeah, it is. This movie is one of those satire that really works. I've seen very few that succeed on a very high level. It's even
Yeah.
tough for me to think of them.
One thing that really stands out about this movie is that the protagonist is somebody that you just go into the movie almost anywhere where you stand on the political spectrum, and you're supposed to hate him. You're supposed to think that he's the bad guy. And I'm trying to pick my words strategically because I don't want to give away anything or ruin anything about the movie. But fundamentally, he does turn out to be a sympathetic character. He does turn out to be right in a lot of ways that you wouldn't expect, and the underlying message is that of human liberty, and that is just not a message that you often get in movies. So I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that Thank You for Smoking had the same approach to political satire that you would get from South Park. But honestly, my favorite professor in college, and this was before I met you two, was in Montana State, and he's the guy who introduced me to South Park, and he accused South Park of being nihilistic, and I agreed with him the first time that I saw a clip from South Park that he showed to me, and then I watched South Park afterward, and I actually got into a certain mindset where I started to really understand the libertarian philosophical framework, and like no, they're not nihilistic. They're just pointing out the bullshit of the American political system and the bipartisan aspects of it. And I think that Thank You for Smoking was actually attacking American politics in the same way that the South Park guys do. And it did it in a really clever way. But yeah, that's
Really? That's that's funny because I guess we should definitely yeah have that discussion once we get the spoilers. But I guess to give like a quick review so we can move on to that because I am surprised by it. I mean, I think what you're saying is not completely off, but I don't think that's what the movie is really going for, or at least it's not the focus of the movie. But yes, it's definitely very cleverly done, and it utilizes those political points for sure to tap into those things. But yeah, as far as a movie, you're right, and this is not spoiling anything. He is supposed to be a very unlikable person, and it does because he's peddling smoking essentially is a good thing. But from moment one, he's likable. It's sort of like almost like Clockwork Orange, where the guy he's a horrible human being, but from moment one, and they do the same thing here. They use the voiceover because the voiceover comes from the main character. So yeah, it's definitely a good device the way they use that, and it's very entertaining, just like in Clockwork Orange. And yeah, and it goes in all different directions and interesting ways and twists and turns. I noticed this time I maybe didn't notice before that bothered me, and I can get into those. But overall, it just sails like it really just it's just a very enjoyable movie to watch. And if I'm not mistaken, my rating for it was from back then, and I think I rated it an 8, and I think I would probably stick to that. I might
yeah.
consider dropping it to a 7, but I think it is above average as far as satire or comedies, in spite of some of the minor things that I've noticed this time around. But it's yeah, I would definitely recommend it, if nothing else, because there's really not a lot of good satire out there. It's not yeah, not very common.
Jason.
I don't know. I'd probably put it at like a 7, maybe a generous, like a good 7, if that makes sense. A strong 7. I don't know why I didn't think it was going to be a good movie when I saw the trailer and when it was coming out. There's something about it that just like I know I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it like a year or so after it came out. And when I did, I was like really regretting that I waited because I really liked it once I saw it. But I agree with what you're saying. There's not enough good, or let's say successful satire being made. And this one's pretty darn good. I would recommend it to just about anybody who likes movies and, freedom.
Freedom. Yeah, again, the freedom thing. We need to get into that. So yeah, well, what's your rating?
Well, I don't think, by the way, before Matt talks about his spiel, I don't know if I would say that it's all that much of a political satire. I think what it's commenting on has far more to do with society than it does anything in the realm of politics. Not that politics are, separate from society, but just in general.
Well, I mean, I actually agree with Jason on
Good
that.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
No, it's not a political. It's not. I'm sorry. I think a few times we said political satire. It's just satire. It's not political per se, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
It's got some politics mixed in.
Yeah. No, I entirely agree with Jason on that, and the fact that so much of the movie is set in DC, and since I lived in DC for 4 years, obviously I'm watching the movie and thinking like, oh, I drove down that road. Oh, I know where that metro stop is, and so on and so forth. Uh, throughout the entire movie, but yeah, no, it is really more social than it is political, though it is both. But I'm just gonna be more generous than you guys and give it like an 8.5. I mean, honestly, it's just one of those things where I'm going to say that it's not a masterpiece. This isn't Saving Private Ryan or anything like that, but it's one of those movies where if you don't like it, I don't get you.
It's a very
Yeah,
likable movie. So it's like
yeah,
a almost Princess Bride level. Maybe not
right.
Stardust, but Princess
I
Bride.
don't know about that.
Right. Yeah.
No, not sorry, not as good as Princess Bride, but it's like in the quality of likability. Like it's just so easy to like the movie. There's very few things that are off-putting about it.
Yeah.
Well, I would agree with that, except to simply add a caveat that it's not as accessible as the things you just compared it to. I mean, if you're a person who, talking about recommending this movie, if you're a person who likes movies and likes comedy and likes a lot of stuff, yeah, you're probably going to like it. But I mean, if you're somebody who's going to the movie hoping for like, us not to give a spoiler or anything, but this isn't really much of one. I don't really feel like Aaron Eckhart has much of a romantic relationship throughout this movie. There's things that happen, but there isn't much of one, and a lot of people only go to the movies for that. There's not any explosions in the movie. A lot of people only go to the movies for that. There's not like a lot of violence, although there's a little bit. So I mean, it's not like the Princess Bride in the sense that it's like got a little bit of everything for everyone kind of thing. But yeah, it's a great movie.
Oh no, I'm just talking about it's a comedy and it's got some good laughs in it, or at least it's very amusing throughout.
I think
And
it's hilarious.
but I do agree that it's not as universal as something like The Princess Bride, which even The Princess Bride, some people are not into fantasy like fairy
There's
tale
people that are
thing.
ridiculous.
Yeah, of course, but there is something about this. The one off-putting thing about it is that it does get into politics to some degree, and it does get into a little bit of like human psychology and the way people think, and that doesn't. Not everybody's into getting in that headspace when they watch a movie. Like, I agree that this is not pure entertainment, like nonsensical, fun entertainment, like the 40-Year-Old Virgin or something. It's definitely something that you need to be in the mood for something like that. Satire is like a different type of comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like we can go into like
Yeah,
kind
let's
of
talk
deeper
about
into
it.
the
Yeah.
spoilers. So going spoilers. Matt, so tell me, so what's about this movie that's like, about freedom, or like to what extent do you think that actually is what the movie is trying to say? Or
Oh, well, the funny thing is, I actually wrote an article on Medium saying that the best libertarian movies are the movies that are accidentally libertarian, and, and I think that this actually qualifies. I don't believe for a second that the filmmakers were actually out to make a libertarian movie, but
Like
the
Escape from
thing,
LA.
right? Yeah, or Minority Report, or The Lives of Others, or anything like that. But the thing that really sticks out to me is that I mean, obviously, corporate lobbyists are not exactly, people's favorite people. That's not really your go-to protagonist. And then you go to a tobacco lobbyist as your protagonist, and
It's even worse.
yeah, that's like public enemy number one. And the thing is, I'm trying my best to keep my personal political views off this channel, but there's no way to avoid it in this case. I actually think that tobacco lobbyists are among the most defensible lobbyists that we actually have, because the onslaught against the tobacco industry has been so strong that really the Nick Naylor's, the main character of the movie, by the way, we didn't actually mention him earlier.
Okay. Now,
The Nick,
people have seen this movie if they're listening,
right?
so
Yeah,
they'll know.
but yeah, the Nick Naylors of the world are actually not the people asking the government for favors. They're not the lobbyists asking the government for favors. They're actually the lobbyists who are just asking the government for the liberty to just keep doing what they're doing. So, in my mind, he's actually the most defensible lobbyist that you can get. And when the movie finally ends and Nick Naylor's in front of Congress, and he finally just flat out says, yeah, cigarettes are addictive. Yeah, they cause cancer. Yeah, they're dangerous. But adults should be treated like adults, and if they want to take on that risk, they should be allowed to do it. I mean, that's, I mean, that's basically libertarian philosophy right there.
I never
Yeah,
thought of it that way. Specifically, just the part you're talking about, what you started with, saying that a tobacco lobbyist has more reason to exist, at least in terms of a libertarian mindset, because of the fact that like you just said, they're not actually asking for the government to do something; they're asking for the government to not do something. And that's interesting because I'd never thought about that. But I don't know how you would justify that as being more of a reason than, say, like a gun lobbyist.
well, I didn't say that. No,
Didn't you say the most?
uh, I, I,
I guess
I
one of the
might have said,
most.
I think I said one of the most, and
Okay.
when
I
I
don't know if he
said
said
one of
one of
the,
the most. I mean, I'm just,
I,
you could
I,
interpret what he said as one
I,
of the
I,
No,
most.
you're right. You're right.
I might have said the most. If I did, I was wrong. One of the most would also be gun lobbyists. Like, yeah, but and now we're going to get doxxed and tarred and feathered and everything like that. And by the
That's
way, anybody,
okay.
yeah, and by the way, anybody
That's okay.
listening,
Nobody
Gil at
cares.
the least probably doesn't agree with me. So don't
Oh, don't
go after
worry.
him.
I'm not gonna agree
Uh, so
with you.
yeah.
But this is an interesting case, and maybe it's because you're more of a rampant libertarian than Jason is, and this is why you read this into the movie and he didn't initially. But I don't think the movie. Uh, that's not the philosophy of the movie. That's of Aaron Eckhart's character. It's all bullshitting. It's all arguments. The whole movie is one series of arguments. He just jumps from one argument to the next. It's just that at the end of the movie, he runs out of arguments, so he pulls the truth card. Fuck it. Yes, we lied all these years. We get scientists to like have bogus experiments just to say that they're not causing cancer, but they are causing cancer. But I'm pulling the freedom card and saying that, like, let people get cancer if they want to get cancer. He doesn't condone it. That's why in the end he leaves the tobacco industry. It was also a calculated like risk because he thought that they were on their way out, because he also outed them in a way in that argument. So if anything, he's making a comment that people are stupid to want this amount of freedom. If you're stupid enough to smoke cigarettes and kill yourself, like, have at it, buddy. But it's a bad idea. And he even has that realization when he almost patches that are put on him and stuff. But I don't think that there's anything here that's like insinuating that that's the ultimate point of the movie, that let people be people. That's not what
No,
the movie is going for. The
no, no,
movie is actually making fun of people being hypocritical. the cheese in the end, like, oh, but Vermont cheese is, like you're not outlawing that. Why would you outlaw cigarettes? But it's just talking about the hypocrisy of all points of views and all different people. But it's not a proponent of freedom, this movie,
But his moral awakening was his libertarian moment.
No, he was just trying to make an argument. I mean, at least that's the way I read it. And he's already played the freedom card with his kid when he was like in Santa Monica, like on the pier, and he was talking about like, why did you take my choice away from me? Like he was teaching his kid how to make an argument based on just freedom of choice, and he used that in the end because his kid also inspired him to do the comeback in the end, and he brought that freedom card that he used with him on the pier. That's all that was. Like it wasn't. He was just trying to win the day, but he also realized that ultimately I'm very good at like making an argument, but why am I gonna keep making it for the wrong people? No. So that's when he got the job offer back to go back, and he quit. He had a realization. Nothing about it was about his politics, or he doesn't really believe that it's just a good argument to make. He's just making the point that everything can be twisted to sound right or to win the argument, but really it's all BS. Really.
Well, I mean, even if that's the point that the movie is trying to make, it's still making the point that the case for liberty always wins.
Yes. Oh no, I agree on that part that it's an incidental thing that if you're a libertarian and you're very into freedom, you'll because it's in there, and freedom is always it's it's uh it's understandable why people like their freedom. But as far as like the lobby, like them having more of a reason to like be a lobby than anybody else, or one of the most, that also doesn't make sense to me because they are stopping the government from, or at least trying to quiet the government from informing citizens more strongly about the dangers of cigarettes. That is something that they're public interest. So it's questionable whether like it's ethical for them to be a lobbyist. It is. I mean, if they had never done bogus experiments to disprove connection to cancer, if they didn't hide information about like the dangers of smoking, if they had played the truth card from the get-go, from like the 30s, 40s, when they first started having commercials for like smoking, then yes, then you can play the freedom card.
Well, but I mean, if you were talking about tobacco lobbyists in like 1950s, you would have an argument. But I mean, there was a case in what, like 1998 where finally somebody did sue, and it turned out that the tobacco companies had been hiding all of that information about the risks of smoking from the public, and like it was a multi like gajillion dollar dump from the tobacco companies. This movie came out in 2005. We're in 2022 now.
No, but I'm saying in the movie, forget the reality.
Well,
In the movie, they don't get redeemed until the last scene in the courthouse when he
yeah,
finally says, yes, it is causing cancer. Yes, it is. And we've been lying all along. He doesn't say we've been lying, but like he admits it. Nobody else from the tobacco industry admits anything throughout this movie. They all hide it. They all know the truth. So there's no,
but
they have no
but the
ethical ground to stand on.
but the thing is, okay, the tobacco industry. You can make an argument that the tobacco industry doesn't have an ethical ground to stand on, but Nick Naylor does in that last scene where he just kind of like waves his hand around to the entire room and says, like, does anybody seriously believe that nicotine is not addictive? Does anybody seriously believe that smoking is healthy for you or anything like that? And like, of course nobody does. We all know that it kills people. We all know that it's a risk. I mean, like the same thing with alcohol. Like we all know that, you know, if they put somebody on the cover of Cosmopolitan and sipping a martini and saying this is healthy, that's bullshit. We all know that. This was a movie made at a
There's not
time when
we
we
all
all
know.
know that.
There's kids that grow up and come of age, and they don't know everything. And obviously, messaging is not always going to work with kids. But the point is, and I agree, he redeems himself in the end. But up until that point, his ethical standing is very questionable. The argument for his likability is that, hey, ultimately he's a nice guy. He just happens to work for an industry that is doing unethical things in his line, and that's not a good thing. But he's also not evil. Like that's what the movie is about. Is that technically even the people that you think are evil, say like the Koch brothers of the world, or like all these people that you think are deceiving you or like have different politics than you, they're people, and they can be very likable sometimes, and they can actually be very ethical people apart from this one aspect of their lives that they just chosen to look the other way, to do it for the mortgage payments. Like they say in the movie, everybody has to pay a mortgage. That's what the movie discusses, is that if you're good at what you do, even if it's on shaky grounds, there's an argument to be made that like this, there's nothing wrong with that. But he ultimately realizes that, well, I can be good at what I do elsewhere.
Yeah, like selling cell phones.
Get to that realization.
Yeah, right. But
the cell phones. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I mean,
because he becomes a consultant. You're right. So he basically he stays a douchebag technically. So I stand corrected.
I mean, the way that I read it is that his discussion with his kid about okay, which is better, vanilla or chocolate, and his kid is trying to make the argument that chocolate is better, and it's like, well, isn't it the best thing that that we have the freedom to choose between chocolate or vanilla or whatever flavor we want at any given time? Isn't that the beauty of the American system, so on and so forth? Again, I'm not getting the quote exactly right.
It's pretty
Is
close.
that at that part of the movie, Nick Naylor is just exercising his, like, yeah. I mean, he's just being a lobbyist. He's just showing that making the argument is more powerful than actually having a good idea. But the thing is, buried in there is a good idea. I mean, it is actually the right argument, which is, like, well, it is by definition a matter of taste. I mean, I might literally despise the movie Funny Games, and you actually liked it, Gil. And it's just like, okay, well, we should have the liberty to choose both, right? Even though I think that watching Funny Games will actually hurt your brain.
Well, you could put a disclaimer on it. You could just put a
Right.
disclaimer in the episode that it might hurt your brain. That's
Yeah,
like what they
right.
said. Like
Yeah,
put
right.
that on the
Yeah.
package of cigarettes. Communicate to the public what.
That's what
Yeah.
Disney does with their movies.
And
By the way, these labels. Oh, with the racism.
With all sorts of stuff.
Disney should put a massive marker of "this movie will make you stupid" on every movie that they produce now. But
emphasis on the word now.
and
I don't agree.
One thing I need to correct is, like, technically I think in the end when he does the whole cell phone bit, like there is no connection between brain, brain tumors and cancer and sorry, brain damage and like cell phones. So I think he was like being more ethical. He's helping companies like have good messaging about. But in any case,
But in 2005, it was a little bit more up in the air.
It was more up in the air, so that's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it does stay a bit the same. But in any case, just to also respond to what.
Yeah, Up in the Air is
What?
another Jason Reitman movie.
Oh,
I
Up
didn't.
in the Air. Yeah. That's a good.
Yeah. Right.
But one thing I was gonna say before I forget too is what you're saying about his freedom speech at the pier. I've referred to it before. It's a script, structure thing. They planted that conversation at that point because it comes back to him in the end when his kid inspires him to go to in front of Congress or whatever, and he repeats that freedom argument because he realizes that's like his last card that he can play to redeem himself somehow. I don't think that was planted with his kid to make some sort of like philosophical libertarianism being like the true way of the world. I think it was just a script structure thing. It was brought, it was there with the kid, and then came back in the end because he was inspired and he remembered what he told his kid. He was like, oh wow, you haven't used that freedom argument yet in this whole thread, so I should bring it now. It's the right time because it's the foolproof argument.
Well,
may I make an observation?
Yeah. Okay, Jason, go ahead. I'll try to keep my thought in my brain.
Yes, please do.
All right.
I just wanted to say that every time I've seen this movie, I definitely read it the way Matt described it. I'm finding it very interesting that Gil is saying that that he's describing it this way, and I'm not inclined to disagree. I think that it's probably, at least on some degree, what the intention was of the people who wrote and or made this movie, all of them involved. But much like another satire film, Starship Troopers, I don't believe that Paul Verhoeven had any sort of like fascist like inklings. I don't think that he feels that that's a better way to run society or anything like that. But unfortunately, even though the movie isn't supposed to be a pro-fascist thing, it's supposed to be kind of taking the piss out of all of that. By the end of the movie, while I should say that I love Starship Troopers, it is a flawed film because it does really glorify a lot of those things that are in the book, like a very pro-fascist society. And I don't think that was intentional, but it's there nonetheless. And I don't know if Jason Reitman or anyone making this movie intended to make the kinds of overall statements that that Matt was making here. But I was reading something here in front of me that said Mike. I just I don't know if that was the intention, but I do believe that that's what came through. Now, I'm not saying that it's like blatantly obvious. I'm not saying that everyone who sees this is going to get that from it, but I believe it's there. I believe there's between several of those scenes and just the fact that it ends on that note and everything like that. I think it's, like Matt said, perhaps unintentionally saying something. I think that, and maybe that's not even its purpose, but what you make is what you make. And in the end, when it comes to any form of art, a lot of times the lasting thing is how people take it more than what it was intended to be.
Yeah, one quick thing I would say before Matt goes on, one quick observation is that we did say before we started that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, produced this movie, like supported it financially, and there is a whole, especially back then, there was a thing going in like Silicon Valley back then. And to this day, Elon Musk is, I think, very much like the libertarian type. Has been proven in recent times. And definitely
he's
Peter
an
Thiel.
anarchist.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I do wonder if one of the reasons why they supported this movie is because it had the freedom angle to it. And maybe that's the way it was sold to them. I'm not sure if Jason Reitman is all there with them, but that alone gives me the thought that maybe I'm wrong and you're right. That maybe, and it does come up a few times in the movie, the freedom argument, it's obviously part of the choice to smoke is that you know that there's a risk, but you choose to take that risk, and that's a good thing to have in society because prohibition, like doesn't tend to work. But effectively, I feel like pretty much what's happened since 2005 is essentially effectively prohibition, and that's why cigarette smoking has dropped significantly in the U.S. because they've made it so difficult and hard to be a smoker that it's just there's less and less people smoking. Now vaping is the new thing. But yes, so there is just that Elon Musk, Peter Thiel thing. That might be a reason to suspect that the freedom thing wasn't just an accidental thing.
Well, I mean, I think I've smoked about 500% more cigarettes since 2005 than I did prior, which basically amounts to 5. But
Okay.
Weird statement, but continue.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, that's the thing. Like when Naylor is speaking before Congress, I think it's actually an important plot point that this is his first time speaking publicly where he's not actually being financed by big tobacco, and he uses the freedom argument. That is when he's actually realizing, oh, my freedom argument that I use with my son as kind of this hypothetical thing while I'm still being paid X amount of dollars, a substantial amount of money to be able to afford that apartment in DC, speaking from experience. Like, okay, well, I've been using the freedom argument, and then finally he is cut off from big tobacco. He is finally speaking before Congress, and he's just speaking for himself. And he he goes back to the freedom argument. I think that's where the movie was actually saying, actually, this isn't just a tactic. This is just the right position.
Yeah. No, I think I'm starting to come around to that. That the just saying that obviously insinuates that there's something to it because it is an argument to end all arguments ultimately, for sure. At the same time, we have like laws against assisted suicides and things like that. Like you gotta to some degree limit what people do to themselves.
No.
Right support so they don't do that to themselves, give them like mental health services and whatnot, but in any case, yes, ultimately it is a public good. Like humans, like they have autonomy. That's a very important thing to people. So it's obviously that's going to resonate coming in the movie. But yeah, point in the movie that the movie is making that I thought it was making is the hypocrisy, is that we're all unethical. We all do stupid things. Like whether your poison is, smoking or alcohol or guns, whatever your vices, we all have them. None of us is clean. And that's why he's redeemable in the end. He's redeemable from the beginning because he's likable, but he sort of, by the end of the movie, is like, yeah, everybody needs to make money and everybody needs to survive, and if you can do it more ethically, great. But life is not black and white. What are you gonna do? And as long as people get a choice, nobody's forcing smoking on anybody, and the information is out there, which it wasn't the end, it wasn't the beginning, which is why it's a bit of an issue. Then yeah, I mean it's totally fine. And eventually the tobacco industry did embrace that, and that's why I think they don't make a lot of money right now. That's why they didn't want to say this early on, decades ago. But it's fine. But yeah, that's the hypocrisy and the fact that like the holier than thou attitude that people have, like the politician, like the William H. Macy character.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like the
Well,
movie is satirizing. It's that
Yeah.
like the reporter who thinks she's smarter and stuff, but and she uses her sex appeal with what's her face,
Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes.
Katie Holmes. Yeah. Which, by the way, I'll bring that up before I forget, is the one thing that kind of bothered me as a plot point is that over the phone when he talks to her, like, hey, why did I thought it was off like record? And she says to him, like, oh, I don't get some people want to like have dinner with me. Some people want to fuck me. That's, it's all part of the interview. I don't know why he wouldn't why is it that he doesn't just right away go and badmouths her in return? Because it was so effective when he did do it later on, a few scenes later.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he so devastated but doesn't think to pull that card and screw her over? That's a bit of a, it just feels like the movie a bit like plot points and stuff are a bit too convenient. Like it's almost like he knew all the tricks all along, but he's waiting for the right moment just to play into the pacing of the movie. That's what I feel like. He was out of ideas. He didn't have arguments, and then he did. I guess semi inspired by his kid. I guess that would be the argument, but the moment that like she does the trick on him, I was like, outs her as someone who she had sex with her subject. That's gonna immediately make her like not a reliable reporter. Yeah, credible. Yeah. So, anyways, that's a minor thing. I'm not.
And that's a fair argument. I mean, I think you could make some psychological points about everything came crashing down so quickly on him that maybe his wherewithal was somewhat compromised. She comes out with a story, he loses his job, he's kidnapped, everything is crumbling.
Yeah, so first time in his life he has no words, he doesn't have anything to.
Right. So it takes him a few days to kind of put everything together and say, oh, I can just say that she was fucking me. So and that's going to kind of ruin her reputation. But yeah, I mean, I see your argument there.
It is interesting that this movie plays on a few different levels. The whole freedom and hypocrisy thing, and yeah, I guess it's true. Whatever you bring to the movie, we've had that discussion on other movies. What you bring to it, I guess with Deception, I think it was a little bit of the cynicism. But yeah, I guess it matters what you bring to the movie. I don't feel like South Park. They're not super libertarian. I mean, to some degree for sure, but it's more just satirizing society and hypocrisy. It's similar to Thank You for Smoking.
I mean, the South Park guys are actually vocally libertarian.
Oh, but as people, they who was it? Walter Block described them on a spectrum that he used of 7 different types of libertarians. He put them at like one end of it, kind of. But I mean, that's just his take on it. I don't think that too much of their politics comes out in the show. Like Gil said, I think it's more focused more on just like everything in society. They just kind of take a look at what seems dumb and just comment on it.
Yeah, so libertarians.
Left and the right, and I guess you can consider that libertarian, but they also make fun of people who are obsessed with freedom. For example, they don't give like.
Gil, one thing that I'll definitely throw to you is that I agree that it's kind of up in the air whether or not Nick Naylor at the end of the movie decided, holy crap, libertarianism is the right argument right now, and not just because it's expedient, but because it's actually correct. I agree with you that it's kind of up in the air in terms of what that character was actually thinking when he made that argument. But the movie, I think no matter how you put it, when you have the climax of the movie, the slam dunk moment of a movie being it's all about freedom of choice. When the antagonist is making the argument that we should abridge freedom of choice, and the protagonist finally says, like, okay, all the cards on the table, yeah, you're right. This is dangerous. This is scary. You're right to be scared about it. We should still have the liberty to put in our bodies what we decide to put in our bodies. Even if the movie didn't intend to make that statement, it made that statement. Even if Nick Naylor wasn't saying, hey, I'm a libertarian now, the movie was making that statement.
I think we've established that it's possible that you can read it both ways. I think the movie was mostly pointing out hypocrisy. That's what I think was the strongest point of the movie. And then his real, as far as what the character realizes, he does. His biggest realization is that he wants to be a better role model to his kid, which is why he didn't take the job offer. So that right there has nothing to do with libertarianism. It has to do with just, I mean, it has to do with freedom to some degree, because he realized that he came up with the freedom argument because he wasn't an employee of the tobacco industry.
Yeah.
And he realized that he liked that freedom, and that he does to some degree argue that freedom is a good thing in general, which is why he chooses to be free of the job. Like he chooses to go into business for himself. But that doesn't necessarily have to do with the smoking, because like the biggest thing is the movie's called Thank You for Smoking. That is a slap in the face to smokers. Like it's basically saying like, thank you for being an idiot and putting this toxic waste in your body.
Yeah.
You know, we'll count the money all the way to the bank. It is actually poking fun at smokers in a way. So I don't think it's like, oh yeah, smokers, we're on your side. You should have to do whatever you want. I don't think that's what this. I think it has something to do with freedom, because he does choose freedom in the end, but it's got nothing to do with smoking or any vice. He just wanted to choose the freedom of like not having to work for people that had questionable ethics from the beginning of the movie and were peddling poison. You know, he knows better now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but he knows he can't escape it, because like, you know, whether it's the, like we said, like the hypocrisy, like whether it's whatever the vice is, there's something to argue or try to twist in an argument. It's always going to be questionable whether you're ethical there, but can you try to be more ethical? You can try. That's what he was saying in the end. Like, I can try.
But I mean,
I don't know.
even
That's
I mean, even in my position, I've turned down jobs where, you know, I disagreed with some kind of ethics in terms of how they were operating or what they were saying. And I mean, I'm still a hardcore free speech advocate, and I'm still a libertarian. But you know, and it doesn't make me any less of a libertarian to just say, you know, you guys are kind of assholes. You know, you do you. I'm just not going to be a part of it. But so I mean, that's kind of how I viewed his decision at the end of the movie. But
yeah. I
man,
mean,
this
Jason, I'm curious to know like what Jason, because I think you've said, because you saw this movie a while back too. I mean, what was your impression? I mean, I know you've noticed the things that Matt said, but was that your view of the movie from the beginning, the first time you saw it too, or?
I think this movie is as I said before, a social satire. I think it's commenting on a lot of things like what Gil's talking about. And I think at the end, I felt like it was definitely making a statement about the, you know, the positive aspect of freedom of choice and things like that. But I mean, I don't know if I would say that was like the takeaway message or anything, but it was definitely there in the movie for sure. I was going to say, I didn't want to derail your question or anything, but I was going to say, I feel like we've kind of talked about the themes and morals and stuff of this movie ad nauseum. I was going to ask Matt if he wanted to make his obligatory cinematography rant about them shooting through a cigarette filter.
Trying to remember that one.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to really rant about that specific shot.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just saying.
Or a cigarette.
That
Yeah.
was silly.
The sixth one.
To be completely honest, James Whittaker is not one of my favorite cinematographers, and this movie really isn't an exception to that. Um, I mean, I like that it was shot on film, and I like that it was shot anamorphic, but it kind of felt, it's weird because I'm in favor of overexposing film, but it seemed like he was kind of hyper overexposing everything that he shot. I mean, it felt like the key lights were constantly burned out on people's faces, and film can generally handle that, but if you're 10 stops over, you're kind of fucked. Really, most of my cinematography gripes were actually probably more on the director than the cinematographer. But
sure.
Honestly, I haven't seen anything that James Whittaker has shot that I thought was particularly good. I mean, he shot he shot The Cooler, and that was actually dramatically underexposed.
Yeah.
But a good movie. He shot Running Scared, which is an underrated movie.
Yes.
That was probably probably his best work. But yeah. Other
That had
than
the same
that,
kid in it too, didn't it?
yeah. That's actually
Strange.
kind of funny. Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah. Maybe we should do an episode on Running Scared. That would be
That would be interesting.
I haven't seen
yeah.
it.
There we go.
Yeah. I I think the best review that I read of Running Scared was, it's basically like Wayne Kramer took a bunch of crack. Yeah. Both the director and the writer, Wayne Kramer, just took a bunch of crack, watched Reservoir Dogs on a continuous loop for 48 hours, and then wrote a script until he passed out.
I don't know why. I think I've heard this before.
It's an interesting movie. I'd be curious to see what Gil thinks about it. I'd be much more interested to see if Gil could watch the movie and then stop it at like 2 minutes before the ending, and then we'll do the podcast, and halfway through we'll just listen to him and listen to him reacting as he watches the last 2 minutes, because it's the last 2 minutes that kind of ruins the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I feel like he'd be like, "Oh man, this was interesting. It's not great. But it's very interesting, and I can't believe I'd never seen it." And blah blah. And then suddenly we would all be listening to him all quietly, and be like, "What the fuck?" I don't know. That's just how it's playing out in my head.
Yeah. No, that is true. Like,
yeah. No, I mean, we could try that. I just need to know what minute to stop so I don't accidentally.
I can find out ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think Matt has the DVD somewhere. I don't know. Anyway.
I actually, since you still Gil, since you probably have most of my DVDs, you probably have the DVD.
Oh yeah, it's in a box in the garage. I'll never find it. But
yeah.
yeah.
But,
Well, what did you?
No, I might.
What do you guys think when it comes to Jason Reitman? Where would you place this in his other films? I've only seen, I think, 4 or 5 of his films, so I haven't seen any of
We
his
didn't
stuff
discuss
that Gil described as like his fall. You know, I haven't seen any of his last like 3 movies.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can give you my quick. Let's see, be a good point to end on. Yeah, it's kind of like looking back at it. I'm not super crazy about his movies, but I think Thank You for Smoking is probably his best.
mhm.
The first time I saw it, and I think it was the only time I saw it. But no, I thought it was an impressive movie, even though it also looked pretty bad, like cinematography. Like something about it, but it sort of worked for it because it was supposed to look Saturday Night Grit. I think Juno is a tad overrated, but it's still a very solid movie. So I would probably place that on third. And I also think it's the extent of the movies that I've seen. I didn't see Young Adult. I didn't see Labor Day. I didn't see Tully. I actually want to see Tully because I think it's about parenthood and stuff, and I feel like that would be appropriate for me and my wife to watch.
The stage of your life.
Yeah, Men, Women, and Children too. I think it was pretty badly, but yeah. So I guess Juno, Up in the Air, and Thank You for Smoking. But they're 3 really good movies. So I mean, that was really like really solid, beginning to his career for sure.
I'd certainly
Yeah.
be very proud if I made those 3 movies.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Thank You for Smoking is easily number 1 for me in terms of his filmography that has become a digitalography in recent years. But I mean, Juno's a pretty close second, though. Thank You for Smoking didn't make me cry. Juno made me cry. Up in the Air, sometimes the cinematography made me cry, but the movie didn't. Young Adult was basically where it was like, oh, he's pulling a Shyamalan. I mean, it wasn't. Yeah, like he's getting progressively worse.
Oh, I thought you were saying like that it had a twist ending. I was like, what?
No, no, it's just that. I mean, Thank You for Smoking was great.
Shyamalan of comedy thing.
No,
Right.
You're right. I never thought about it until you said it right now. I would say that Young Adult is definitely his Village.
Yeah. Only he didn't have Roger freaking Deakins.
No, he did not have Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
Although, yeah. Okay, that's true. Personally, I think that Juno and Up in the Air are both really good. I would hold those as his best. Although Up in the Air really benefited from being like a movie of its time, and even though I still think it has a lot of rewatch value, it's definitely not like it was when I went and saw it in theaters. And I do agree that Juno is overrated. I just still think it's like easily his best or tied for his best movie. I think that Thank You for Smoking is a close second or third, depending on how you look at that. And then I think there's a significant drop to Young Adult. Although I like Young Adult, I enjoyed that movie. I got, I think I was appropriately pissed off at the end, which is what I think they were kind of going for. And whatever, it's just not as good of a movie, and I think it kind of fails in a couple of ways. And then I'm looking right now. I don't think I've seen anything else he's made after Young Adult.
You know what? I think I might have seen Young Adult. That's crazy. I think I saw Young Adult. That's how not great it was. Because now I realize that what's his face, Patrick Wilson was in it, and I'm like, Am I remembering this? Like, I did see this movie. I think I saw this movie.
Patton
Yeah,
Oswalt was excellent in